In today's video, I'm going to be talking all about the Claybord Box Kit by Ampersand. I'm going to be sharing with you my mixed media technique for how to create an illustration with this look on one of their boxes. A few days ago, I did a live demo on the Claybord Box Kit for Ampersand, and they so graciously sent me a couple extra ones as well, so I thought it would be fun to also share the process in a video. They make the Claybord box kit in two different sizes, 5x7 and 5x5. The kit has everything you need, which includes a Claybord panel along with the hinges and the bottom of the box to create the full set. Claybord feels very differently than painting on any other surface, so I just took one of their pieces of panel they have with no cradle and tested out a couple different supplies to show you guys the results. Essentially, I was looking for something that gave me a lot of control, but I was still able to layer up. So you'll see each of the names there at the bottom. I ended up using watercolor marker and acrylic gouache with some watercolor pencil. I had finished this painting in my sketchbook earlier in the week, and I like how it came out, but I wanted to change the colors, so I thought it would be fun to try it out on this Claybord kit. So after transferring my sketch with some graphite paper, I started off with the watercolor markers. And again, I chose these first because they give you a lot of control. You can essentially just place the marker down and then follow behind it with a wet brush to diffuse the edges. These watercolor markers are very transparent, so as long as you let them dry in between layers, you can build them up optically to create new colors. But you're essentially just going to get the color that you choose out of these markers. Um, there's a little bit of a challenge when trying to build them up saturation-wise. They just don't layer the same as they would on paper on top of the clay board. But that's kind of why I like trying out new surfaces with different supplies. I love the challenge of seeing if I can make it work, and also I think it's just fun to see how things come out differently. Illustrating on this surface really feels like almost illustrating on glass or something, almost like pearly. It's very smooth, and the clayboard is clay, so it's absorbent, and um, when you're using it, you can use a little bit of extra water to move stuff around, or if you want the paint to stay exactly where you place it, just use more paint. So for the acrylic gouache, I use two different brands, Holbein and Turner. I actually think I like Turner more, but at the end of the day, I think they're pretty similar. And I definitely wanted to lean into the pink and gold combo, so I ended up changing my palette around a little bit. But the main thing with the acrylic gouache is, it dries waterproof. So I wanted to layer that on top of my watercolor beneath. Anywhere where I place this paint, it'll be completely permanent and it won't disturb the watercolor underneath if I don't use too much water. So I had a fun time building up all my details with this one. And the clayboard itself is extremely smooth. It's like using hot press paper but on serious steroids because it's so smooth. It's almost slippery. So if you're using a little bit of extra water, it kind of gives it this unique, almost streaky look, which is really fun. I don't have the opportunity to get a lot of texture kind of like that painterly stroke in the style of art that I do on the surfaces I use, since I'm normally using wood and things that are a little bit more absorbent. So it was fun to play around with that and leave some areas loose and then really tighten other areas up. And I really enjoy using the acrylic gouache because you can water it down enough that it kind of looks like a watercolor, or you can paint it really thick so it looks more like an acrylic. So I think that I'll probably be reaching for the acrylic gouache, especially if I'm painting on clay board. And for this piece, I went about it a little bit differently than I normally do. I like to save my details for last normally, but for this one, I just kind of was all over the place because I didn't really have a concrete plan of how I wanted it to look. I just knew that I wanted to change the colors a little bit. So it was a very experimental and fun piece for me to paint. And in addition to using the watercolor markers and acrylic gouache, I also used watercolor pencils. I didn't actually add any water to these though. I just kind of used them like regular colored pencils. With the watercolor pencils, you have the ability to kind of diffuse the edge, but I essentially was just using them to refine my lines and add a little bit of extra shading throughout. I didn't want to add too much because I was enjoying the colors, so I didn't want to alter it. And I didn't want my illustration to look any more bold than it was, because it was kind of interesting how it was teetering back and forth between looking very soft and also having kind of like a harsher look. I don't know, I can't really explain it. But using dry media on the clayboard is again interesting because of how smooth of a surface it is. So your shading you have full control over. The only thing is if you're working mixed media like I am, if you have any raised textured areas because you piled up your acrylic gouache, or perhaps you're using some sort of paint that has a little bit of thicker quality to it. That's just something to keep in mind when using your pencils over top. And if you like using microns in your artwork and you are a big fan of pen and ink, I definitely recommend trying it out on the clayboard because you can chase it with a wet brush and kind of blend the pen out a little bit. I'll include a little snippet of a piece that I painted for Ampersand using this technique. And I think there's actually a video out too. I'll link that also. But using the microns is a great way to get a really clean technical line on the panel. All right, so I have all of the actual paint and color application part done, so I'm just going to clean up my desk a little bit. And this next technique is using a Scratchboard tool, but if you have an X-Acto knife, or you could even use something like a push pin, as long as it has a sharp tip on it, you'll be able to actually scratch into the surface of the panel and lift up that white layer underneath. This is really an awesome technique if you want to add some small technical line kind of highlights throughout. I carved into a couple areas that I wanted to clean up and added some minor details. It will, of course, cut into the panel just a little bit, but it should be okay. Nobody will be able to tell. So attaching the hinges is pretty simple. You just line them up, mark them off. I used a punch tool, and then I just put the screws in about halfway. I wanted to make sure that the box closed how I wanted it to, and then once everything was lined up, just use your drill or a screwdriver and get those screws seated all the way so everything works nice and tight. After you get your hinges on, you're going to want to varnish or protect your panel with a UVLS spray. This way, if people are touching the box to open it, then it will be fully protected. I think that I'm going to call this one I'll Keep Your Secret Safe. Just kind of like a cute concept with the birds and the box. So this one I decided to leave unpainted on the sides and on the inside. I think it looks really pretty just with the gold hinges. But here's some other boxes that I've made. And on the pink and black one, I did paint the inside just to see what it would look like. I hope that you guys enjoyed this process and hopefully learned a thing or two along the way. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful week.